the fortress of numbers, the 53rd floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Chicago hummed with a particular kind of silence, the kind that cost millions to engineer. It was the silence of power, of decisions that moved markets, and of Damien Frost's carefully constructed world. The Singapore portfolio is underperforming by 3.2%, Damien stated, his voice as measured as the Swiss timepiece adorning his wrist. At 41, his dark hair was threaded with silver at the temples, not from stress, but precision. Even the way he aged seemed calculated. I want a complete restructuring proposal by tomorrow morning. The board members nodded in unison, their faces masks of determination tinged with unmistakable fear. Frost Capital Partners hadn't become a $17 billion hedge fund by tolerating mediocrity. As the meeting dispersed, Damien remained, gazing through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. Chicago spread like a mathematical equation, orderly, solvable, predictable. Unlike people, unlike emotions, Mr. Frost, his executive assistant, Vivian, appeared with her customary efficiency. The Foundation Board is waiting for your quarterly address. Damien suppressed a sigh. The Frost Foundation for Mathematical Excellence had been his concession to public relations, a tax advantage, way to improve his company's image while promoting the discipline that had given meaning to his life. Mathematics had been his salvation after Natalie had left, taking his trust and half his early fortune with her. Schedule says we're discussing the Public Engagement Initiative, Vivian added, scrolling through her tablet. The board approved bringing in that cultural consultant. Damien frowned. The one who thinks we need music programs. Waste of resources. Research shows arts integration improves mathematical comprehension by 28%. Vivian countered, one of the few people brave enough to challenge him, and she's highly qualified. Northwestern University's youngest conductor in residence before she started her consultancy. Fine, Damien replied curtly, but she reports directly to me. I won't have someone dismantling our focus on empirical education. 15 minutes later, Damien stood before his foundation board, delivering precisely calculated remarks about quantifiable outcomes and measurable impact. He was wrapping up when the conference room door opened silently. A woman slipped in, nodding apologetically to the board secretary. She wore a simple charcoal dress, her copper hair swept into a loose knot. What caught Damien's attention wasn't her appearance but her stillness. She listened with complete focus, her head slightly tilted as if hearing something beneath his words. In conclusion, Damien finished, irritated by the distraction, we'll continue our evidence-based approach to mathematical excellence. Questions? I have one, the latecomer said, her voice carrying a musical lilt. What if excellence isn't just about evidence? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Board members exchanged nervous glances. And you are? Damien asked, though he had already deduced her identity. Juniper Reeves, she replied, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Your new cultural consultant. Ms. Reeves, Damien said coolly. At Frost Foundation we value punctuality as highly as precision. A slight smile crossed her lips. I value both as well, Mr. Frost. My train was delayed by 43 minutes due to signal failures. I calculated it was better to arrive and contribute than to miss the meeting entirely. Something in her calm response, neither apologetic nor defensive, caught him off guard. As for my question, Juniper continued, I've reviewed your foundation's impressive work. Your mathematical programs are rigorous, but they're missing the element that makes mathematics transcendent rather than merely technical, the human element. The board seemed to collectively hold its breath as Damien regarded her with narrowed eyes. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially not by consultants whose salaries he paid. Transcendence isn't measurable, Ms. Reeves, he replied. We deal in outcomes. So does music, she countered. But the greatest mathematical minds throughout history understood that. Numbers and notes are different expressions of the same universal language. She approached the whiteboard, picking up a marker with easy confidence. May I? Before he could object, she drew a simple wave function, then beneath it, the notation for batches, cello suite no 1. The mathematics of harmony, Juniper said quietly, both precise and profound. For the briefest moment, Damien felt something he hadn't experienced in years, intellectual curiosity untethered from strategy or profit. He dismissed it immediately. Impressive parlor trick, he said. We'll discuss your actual implementation plan privately. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., as the board filed out, Damien noticed Juniper gathering her notes, seemingly unbothered by his dismissal. For someone who had built his life on predicting human behavior, her equanimity was unsettling. Mr. Frost, she said as he turned to leave, I look forward to tomorrow. I suspect we might find more common ground than either of us expects. Damien didn't respond. Common ground was for people who needed others, and he had long ago learned the danger of need. The whispering artist Juniper Reeves lived in a world of sound. Even now, walking through the steel and glass lobby of Meridian Tower for her 9 a.m. meeting, she heard the symphony of the space, the percussive click of heels on marble, the legato hum of distant conversations, the staccato ding of elevator arrivals. Her modest apartment in Wicker Park was nothing like this monument to wealth, but it had one thing this place lacked: soul. She'd filled her home with instruments, books, and plants that spilled from every surface. Her neighbors knew her as the woman who practiced conducting at dawn, her silhouette visible through sheer curtains as her hands painted invisible melodies against the rising sun. Double quotes Ms. Reeves. Vivian appeared beside the security desk. "Mr. Frost is ready for you." The executive assistant's efficient warmth contrasted sharply with her employer's arctic demeanor. As they ascended in the private elevator, Vivian offered a rare warning. "He's reviewed your proposal 3 times since yesterday. I've never seen him so attentive to a foundation matter." "Is that good or bad?" Juniper asked, adjusting the leather messenger bag containing her presentation materials. Vivian's smile was diplomatic. "Let's say he doesn't usually invest personal time in initiatives he plans to reject." The elevator opened directly into Damien's office, a vast space of minimalist design, its white walls adorned only with framed mathematical equations that Juniper recognized as breakthrough theorems. No photographs, no personal touches. The view of Lake Michigan stretched beyond floor-to-ceiling windows like an abstract canvas of blue and gray. Damien stood with his back to her, a phone pressed to his ear. "Liquidate the position," he said flatly. "The algorithm doesn't account for the regulatory change." He ended the call without pleasantries and turned. "Punctual today," he observed, gesturing to a glass conference table. "The red line was merciful this morning," Juniper replied, unpacking her materials. "Though I did calculate a 15-minute buffer into my travel time." A ghost of amusement flickered across his face. "Probability and risk assessment. Perhaps you understand mathematics better than you let on." "Music and mathematics have been intertwined since Pythagoras," she said, organizing her papers with practiced precision. "I may not calculate derivatives, but I understand patterns, harmonics, and the mathematics of tempo and resonance." Damien sat across from her, his posture perfect. "Your proposal suggests integrating musical education into our advanced mathematics programs for underprivileged students. Expensive, unproven in our demographic. Why should I divert resources from proven methodologies?" Juniper had anticipated his resistance. Instead of immediately defending her proposal, she pushed a small device across the table. "Before I answer, would you indulge me for exactly 40 seconds? His eyebrow arched, but he nodded once. Juniper pressed play on the small speaker. The room filled with the sound of 30 teenagers playing a mathematical sequence translated into musical notation, piece she had composed and taught to a youth orchestra in Detroit's most challenged district. As the complex pattern unfolded, she watched Damien's face. For a moment, brief but unmistakable, his analytical mask slipped, revealing something raw and responsive. When the recording ended, she spoke softly. "Those students failed standard math assessments 3 years running. After 6 months of mathematical music theory, 92% passed, 78% achieved advanced standings. Correlation doesn't imply causation," Damien countered. But his voice lacked its usual dismissive edge. "Which is why I brought these." Juniper slid a folder of peer-reviewed studies across the table. "The neurological impact of music on mathematical comprehension is well documented. I'm not suggesting replacing your programs, I'm proposing enhancement." For the next 30 minutes, they engaged in the most rigorous intellectual discourse Juniper had experienced since defending her master's thesis. Damien challenged every assumption, demanded evidence for every claim, and occasionally, very occasionally, nodded in reluctant agreement. "Your passion is evident," he finally said, "but passion doesn't scale. I need metrics, implementation protocols, and quantifiable outcomes before committing foundation resources." "Fair enough," Juniper replied, undaunted. "Give me 1 month with a pilot group. If I can't demonstrate measurable improvement, I'll withdraw my proposal and refund my consulting fee." Damien's eyes narrowed. "You'd stake your reputation and compensation on results." "Absolutely," she said without hesitation. "Because, unlike you, Mr. Frost, I've seen what happens when children discover that mathematics isn't just numbers, it's a language that can express beauty." The silence that followed was charged with something neither had anticipated. Recognition, perhaps. 2 people viewing the same truth through different lenses. 1 month, he finally agreed. "Starting next week, you'll work from here 3 days a week to minimize variables in implementation." As Juniper gathered her materials, Damien's phone rang again. He glanced at it with annoyance that melted into concern. "I need to take this," he said, suddenly distracted. "Vivian will handle the details of your arrangement." Juniper nodded and headed for the door, but paused when she heard his voice change completely as he answered. "Eleanor," he said, his tone gentler than Juniper had thought possible from him. "Yes, I remember. Of course I'll be there." "No, it's not an imposition. You're the only family I have." The vulnerability in those last words caught Juniper by surprise. As she slipped out, she glanced back to see Damien gazing out at the lake, phone pressed to his ear. His reflection in the glass revealing a man far more complex than the algorithmic tyrant she'd prepared to battle. Outside in the hallway, Vivian was waiting with paperwork. "Successful meeting?" the assistant asked. "We've reached an understanding," Juniper replied thoughtfully, "though I suspect I've just glimpsed the tip of a very deep iceberg." Vivian's smile was enigmatic. Mr. Frost is ... complicated. Most people only see what he wants them to see. And what's that? The fortress, Vivian said simply, not what it's protecting. Dissonant harmony is 3 weeks into the pilot program. Juniper had transformed a sterile conference room on the 49th floor into what Damien's employees now called the lab. Mathematical formulas flowed alongside musical notations on whiteboards. 17 students from Chicago's South Side filled the space twice weekly. Their initial reluctance transformed into focused engagement. Today, as the students filed out after their session, Damien appeared in the doorway, his third unannounced observation this week. He'd been watching more frequently. Though he rarely spoke during the sessions, they mastered the Fibonacci sequence faster through rhythm patterns than any previous cohort did through traditional methods, he remarked, examining a student's work. Juniper nodded, gathering instruments. Music makes abstract patterns tangible. They feel mathematics instead of just seeing it. Feeling isn't knowing, he countered, but without his usual conviction. Tell that to Mozart. Juniper smiled. Or would you argue he didn't understand mathematical structure? A reluctant smile tugged at Damien's mouth. You're persistently challenging Ms. Reeves. Please. After 3 weeks of mathematical debates, I think we've earned first-name basis. Juniper, then, he conceded, the syllables sounding unusually deliberate in his precise diction. Their conversation was interrupted by Vivian's urgent entrance. Mr. Frost, there's an emergency board call in 5 minutes. The Singapore Fund's primary bank is threatening regulatory action over documentation discrepancies. Damien's expression hardened instantly. Prepare my office. I need the compliance files and legal on standby. Juniper began gathering her things, sensing the abrupt end to their interaction. But Damien turned to her with unexpected directness. Stay. This involves the Foundation's endowment. Your program's funding could be affected. Surprised, she nodded and followed them to Damien's office, where tensions mounted as board members and lawyers joined the conference call. Accusations flew about missing compliance documentation for a major investment that supported multiple Foundation initiatives, including her pilot program. The files were submitted last quarter, Damien insisted, his controlled voice betraying only the slightest edge. The regulatory body claims they never received them, a nervous board member replied. Without them, the fund faces suspension by morning. The Foundation's operations would freeze immediately. Juniper watched as Damien's team scrambled, searching databases and email archives. The situation's gravity was evident in his tightening posture each passing minute, hemorrhaging both money and reputation. The original documents were handled by Westerly before his retirement, someone noted. His filing system was ... unconventional. 30 minutes until the Hong Kong market opens, another voice warned. Once it does, this becomes public. In the controlled chaos, Juniper noticed something no one else seemed to. Damien's subtle pattern of distress. While others panicked openly, his reaction was almost algorithmic, tapping his left index finger in groups of 3, followed by 2, 3, then 2. A rhythm. Juniper approached the extensive bookshelves where financial records were meticulously organized. What was Westerly's background before finance? She asked quietly. Damien glanced up, momentarily distracted. Classical piano. He was at Juilliard before switching to economics. Why? Because musicians categorize differently, Juniper replied, scanning the shelves. We think in movements, not just chronology. She ran her fingers along the row of identical black binders, stopping at a section that seemed unremarkable to others, but jumped out to her trained eye. The spacing between certain volumes was slightly wider, creating a visual rhythm similar to the pattern Damien had been tapping. Juniper pulled a binder that appeared identical to those surrounding it, except for a tiny notation on its spine, not a date or number, but a small musical sharp symbol. Inside were the missing compliance documents, filed not by date or project name, but by the tonal structure Westerly had assigned to different investment categories. Found them, she announced, handing the binder to Damien. He organized by musical key signatures, not quarters. This section is E-sharp, technically F, but musicians sometimes use sharp notation to maintain conceptual consistency across a sequence. The room fell silent as Damien quickly verified the documents. With remarkable efficiency, his team began transmitting them to the regulatory authorities, averting the crisis with minutes to spare. As the emergency dispersed, Damien remained at his desk, studying Juniper with uncharacteristic openness. You saw a pattern no one else could see, he said finally. How I noticed you tapping, she explained. 3 beats, then 2. It's the opening rhythm of Beethoven's Fifth, the most famous motif in classical music. Some historians believe it represented fate knocking at the door. I wasn't aware I was doing that, Damien admitted, looking at his hand as if it had betrayed him. We all have tells when we're stressed. Yours happens to be musically significant. Juniper smiled. And Westerly's organizational system made perfect sense to me. Musicians see the world through patterns that others miss. For a moment, the usual barriers between them seemed too thin. Damien stood, walking to the windows as evening lights began appearing across the city. My father played Beethoven's Fifth every Sunday morning, he said quietly. I haven't thought about that in years. The personal revelation so unexpected hung in the air between them. Juniper sensed there was more to the story but didn't press. Thank you, he said finally, turning back to her. You saved the foundation. Considerable embarrassment today. Does that earn my program permanent funding? She asked, only half joking. Let's discuss it over dinner, Damien replied, then seemed surprised by his own suggestion, to review the program's progress. Of course, Juniper echoed, gathering her things. Though I should warn you, Mr. Frost. Damien, he corrected. Damien, she acknowledged with a small smile. I should warn you that I'm as passionate about food as I am about music. I might challenge your preferences there too. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. I'm beginning to expect nothing less. As they left the office separately, Damien to finish urgent calls, Juniper to prepare for their unexpected dinner meeting, Vivian caught her eye with a knowing look that Juniper pretended not to notice. The crisis had shifted something between them, whether temporary or lasting remained to be seen. But as Juniper rode the elevator down, she recognized the familiar tension of instruments being tuned before a difficult piece, the necessary dissonance before harmony could emerge. The unwritten melody. The small Italian restaurant in Chicago's Little Italy district was a world away from Damien's usual dining establishments. No Michelin stars, no sommeliers, just family recipes passed down through generations and walls lined with faded photographs. My grandmother would approve, Juniper said, savoring the homemade gnocchi. She taught me to cook and play piano simultaneously, said they required the same attention to timing. Damien, surprisingly at ease in this unpretentious setting, watched her with curiosity. You speak of your grandmother often. She raised you. After my parents died, Juniper nodded. A car accident when I was 8. Nona lived with us already, so she simply ... continued, taught music to support us. I'm sorry, Damien said, the words simple but genuine. Life has its unexpected cadences. She replied. What about your family? You mentioned your father played Beethoven. Something shadowed his expression. My father was a mathematics professor. My mother left when I was very young. Eleanor, my aunt, helped raise me after my father died during my college years. The Eleanor from your phone call that day in your office, Juniper observed. A flash of surprise crossed his face. You remembered that? I remember patterns in conversations as well as music. Their professional discussion about the pilot program had long since concluded. The foundation board had approved permanent funding after the students' remarkable progress, yet neither seemed inclined to end the evening as they walked along the lamplit streets afterward. There's a piano bar around the corner, Juniper suggested impulsively. Nothing fancy, but the pianist is brilliant. To her surprise, Damien agreed. As they settled at a small table, the pianist was playing a nuanced rendition of a Chopin nocturne. Juniper watched Damien's hands, those hands that moved markets and built empires, unconsciously marking the rhythm against his knee. You play, she realized suddenly. Played, he corrected, a lifetime ago. Before she could respond, her phone rang. The hospital's number sent a chill through her. Juniper excused herself, stepping outside to take the call. When she returned minutes later, her face had lost all color. Nona's had a stroke, she said, voice steady despite her evident shock. I need to go. I'll drive you, Damien said immediately, already signaling for the check. You don't have to. I know. The hospital corridor seemed endless as they hurried toward the ICU. Damien's presence beside her was unexpected yet steadying his efficiency, clearing administrative hurdles that might have delayed her. When they reached her grandmother's room, the doctor was waiting. The next 24 hours are critical, he explained gently. The stroke affected her left side. We won't know the extent of damage until she regains consciousness. Looking at her grandmother, the vibrant, strong-willed woman who filled their apartment with music and laughter now connected to monitors and breathing tubes, Juniper felt her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. I'll give you privacy, Damien said, turning to leave. Stay, she whispered, surprising herself. Please. He nodded once, taking a seat in the corner of the room while Juniper settled beside the bed, holding her grandmother's hand. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Occasionally, nurses came to check vitals, their sympathetic glances taking in the unusual pair. The orchestral conductor in her simple dress and the billionaire in his bespoke suit, united in vigilance. Near midnight, Juniper finally spoke. She sacrificed everything for me, she said quietly, postponed her own dreams. She was a composer, you know, brilliant one, but raising me became her priority. She chose what mattered most to her, Damien replied. Did your aunt make similar sacrifices? Damien was silent for a long moment. Eleanor gave up a promising career to help raise me after my father died. I was ... difficult, angry at the world. She never complained. Is that why you created the foundation? Partially, he admitted. She was a teacher in an underfunded district. I saw how mathematical education changed lives, gave options to those with few. After Natalie left, he stopped abruptly, as if he'd said too much. Your ex, Juniper asked softly, my fiancé. His voice turned clinical. She was fascinated by the tortured genius narrative, until the narrative became inconvenient, and my competitor offered a more advantageous alliance. The betrayal behind those measured words echoed in the sterile room. I'm sorry, Juniper said simply. It was a valuable lesson in human nature. Emotions cloud judgment. I rebuilt my life on empirical certainties. And yet, she observed gently, you've sat in this hospital room for 6 hours with a woman you barely know, supporting her through an emotional crisis that offers no strategic advantage. Before he could respond, a small sound came from the bed. Juniper's grandmother's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition when she saw her granddaughter. Juniper, she whispered hoarsely, her right hand squeezing weakly. Tears of relief streamed down Juniper's face as she called for the nurse. In the flurry of medical assessment that followed, she was vaguely aware of Damien stepping out to give them privacy. Later, after her grandmother had fallen back asleep, this time naturally Juniper found Damien in the waiting area, working on his laptop. The doctors are optimistic, she told him, exhaustion evident in her voice. The damage seems less extensive than they feared. I'm glad, he said, closing his computer. I've arranged for a specialist to consult tomorrow. Damien, I can't accept you can and you will, he interrupted, his tone brooking. No argument. Consider it the Foundation's contribution to musical education. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. That's a rather tenuous connection. Nevertheless, he stood, gathering his things. My driver will take you home whenever you're ready. I've taken the liberty of clearing your Foundation schedule for the rest of the week. Thank you, she said, meaning more than the words could convey, for everything tonight. He nodded once, then hesitated. Juniper, what I said earlier about emotions clouding judgment, you don't need to explain, she assured him. Perhaps not, he agreed, but I'm finding that some truths I've held as absolute may require ... reconsideration. With that enigmatic statement, he left, leaving Juniper to wonder what invisible barriers had shifted between them in the quiet hours of crisis. Cadence of second chances. 3 months after her grandmother's stroke, Juniper stood backstage at Symphony Center, her heart racing. The Frost Foundation's first annual Mathematics in Harmony showcase was about to begin. Her pilot program expanded to include students from across Chicago, culminating in tonight's performance. 5 minutes, Miss Reeves, the stage manager announced. Juniper straightened her concert black attire, thinking of how much had changed. Her grandmother was recovering remarkably, already back to teaching piano from their apartment, albeit with accommodations for her weakened left side. The Foundation program had expanded beyond everyone's expectations, with inquiries from educational institutions nationwide, and then there was Damien. Since that night at the hospital, their professional relationship had deepened into something neither quite knew how to define. Weekly program reviews became working dinners. Theoretical discussions extended into long walks along the lakefront. They argued passionately about teaching methodologies, challenged each other's assumptions, and occasionally, very occasionally, shared fragments of their closely guarded personal histories. Yet both maintained careful boundaries. She, wary of the power imbalance, he still armored against emotional vulnerability. Tonight would change everything. Damien didn't yet know that she had accepted a prestigious position with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity beginning in 6 weeks. The Foundation program was now self-sustaining, with trained instructors ready to continue her work. There was no reason to stay in Chicago. No professional reason, at least. Places, everyone, the stage manager called. Taking a deep breath, Juniper stepped onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. The auditorium was filled with students, families, Foundation donors, and educational administrators. In the front row sat her grandmother, beaming proudly despite her lingering weakness, and beside her Damien, impeccable in a tailored tuxedo, his expression unreadable. Good evening, Juniper addressed the audience. Tonight, 68 students from across Chicago will demonstrate how mathematics and music intertwine to create understanding beyond what either discipline alone can achieve. For the next hour, her students performed mathematical concepts translated into original compositions, probability expressed through jazz improvisation, geometric principles through harmonics, algebraic equations through counterpoint. The audience watched in amazement as students who had once struggled with basic concepts now confidently explained complex mathematical principles through musical demonstration. For the finale, Juniper took her place at the grand piano, joined by a student string quartet. Our final piece was composed collaboratively by our students, based on a mathematical sequence with special significance to our program's founder, she announced. We call it the Frost Theorem. As she began to play, she glanced at Damien. For the first time since she'd known him, his carefully maintained composure had vanished completely. He recognized the mathematical foundation of the piece. It was based on the theorem he had developed in graduate school, the work that had launched his career, translated into a hauntingly beautiful musical composition. When the final notes faded, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Amid the celebration, Juniper noticed Damien slip quietly backstage. After completing her closing remarks and accepting congratulations from board members, she found him alone in the green room, staring out the window. "You didn't tell me you were leaving," he said without turning, his voice unnaturally even. Juniper froze. "How did you? The LA Philharmonic issued a press release this afternoon. Apparently they're quite excited about their new associate conductor. I was going to tell you tonight," she said softly. After the performance, he turned then, his expression carefully controlled. "Congratulations, it's an exceptional opportunity. Damien, the foundation will arrange a replacement for the program. Your work has created a strong foundation, if you'll forgive the pun." His retreat into formality was exactly what she had feared. "Stop it," she said firmly. "Don't hide behind professional courtesy. Not with me." Something flashed in his eyes, anger, pain. She couldn't be certain. "What would you have me say, Juniper? That I understand why you'd leave?" "I do. That I wish you success. I absolutely do." "And is that all?" she pressed. "What else should there be?" His voice was tight. "We've had a productive professional relationship. Your career is advancing as it should." Juniper stepped closer, refusing to let him retreat. "3 nights ago, we talked until dawn about everything from quantum mathematics to your childhood piano lessons. That's not just professional." "Damien, perhaps that was my mistake," he said coldly. The words stung, but Juniper saw beyond them to the fear beneath his anger. "You know what the students taught me about mathematical proofs?" she asked quietly. "That sometimes the most elegant solution requires letting go of initial assumptions, reframing the problem entirely. This isn't a theorem, Juniper. This is reality. Reality is that I have 6 weeks before I leave," she said. "Reality is that I've been offered my dream job 3,000 miles away. And reality is that I've fallen in love with a man who built a fortress around his heart so impenetrable that I'm not sure even he knows how to find the door anymore." The silence that followed her declaration seemed endless. "I can't be what you need," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "I never asked you to be anything but yourself," she countered. "The real question, Damien, is whether you're brave enough to discover who that actually is beyond the algorithms and defense mechanisms." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Your student Marquis said something remarkable today. He said music taught him that mathematics isn't just about finding the right answer, it's about asking better questions." She met his eyes one last time. "Maybe that's true for life as well." With that, she left, the sound of her footsteps echoing down the corridor. 4 weeks later, Juniper was packing her apartment when the doorbell rang. Her grandmother, now walking with a cane, went to answer it. "Juniper," she called, "there's someone here to see you." Damien stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. In his hand was a worn leather portfolio. "May I come in?" he asked. Her grandmother tactfully disappeared into her bedroom as Juniper gestured him inside. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, running a hand through his hair, a gesture of nervousness she'd never seen from him before. "About better questions, as you put it." He opened the portfolio, removing several papers. "This is the deed to a new foundation headquarters in Los Angeles," he explained, laying it on her cluttered coffee table. "And this is the organizational restructure establishing bicoastal operations with you as executive director of West Coast initiatives, should you accept." Juniper stared at the documents, speechless. "I'm not asking you to choose between your dream and whatever this is between us," Damien continued. "I'm asking for the chance to find out if there's a different solution, one that accommodates all variables." "You're moving to Los Angeles?" she asked, finding her voice. "Establishing a presence there," he clarified. "I'll still need to be in Chicago regularly, but technology makes remote work increasingly viable, and there are flights every day." Juniper studied his face. Why? For perhaps the first time since she'd known him, Damien didn't calculate his response. "Because when you left that night, I realized I've spent 15 years building an empire that feels meaningless if I can't share it with someone who sees the world differently than I do, someone who challenges me, someone who finds the patterns I miss." He took a deep breath. "Someone I love." The words, so unexpected from him, filled the small apartment with possibility. "I can't promise I'll be good at this," he added quietly. "I'll make mistakes. I'll retreat into old patterns. But I want to try, Juniper." She stepped forward, taking his hands in hers. "That's all anyone can ask for. The courage to try. Is that a yes?" he asked, uncertainty still evident in his eyes. "It's a better question," she replied with a smile. "And those deserve thorough exploration." As she drew him closer, Juniper thought of all the mathematical theorems and musical compositions that had brought them to this moment, each with its own complexity, beauty, and resolution. Some harmonies took time to develop, some proofs required patience to solve. They had time now to discover their own unique solution, one note, one number at a time.